Hi, this is Robert Kuhn, Director of International Campaigns.
Por la vida en Colombia está lleno de frutos.
Lossen und manche dann sagen, ja, es ist nicht mehr so.
People start saying that, if your thoughts fall foul of the popular opinion, that they're somehow criminal.
Mi hija ha decidido no abortar.
Our freedom in a democracy, in our open society, begins with the freedom of speech.
Ante todo, los pilares de 40 días, ¿no? La oración, el ayuno, la yoga.
So sometimes it's just a little thing that we have to do. So
también dignidad, que son creados también por
But
Dios.
Beyond what we say, anything we do at 40 Days for Life, anything we say to defend the unborn, we do with love.
Los bebés no tienen que ser abortados de una madre.
40 Days for Life International Podcast.
El podcast de 40 días por la vida internacional.
Hi, and welcome to the 40 Days for Life International podcast. My name is Robert Cahoon. I'm the Director of International Campaigns, and welcome to yet another episode. We've had so many fascinating people on our podcast, and we're really blessed and honoured today to have Father Francesco Giordano, who's the Director of Human Life International. That's one of the biggest pro-life organisations in the world. He's been in their Rome office since July 2015, following in the footsteps of the HLI's former director, Monsignor Barreiro. He's a diocesan priest and a professor in Rome, Italy. He was ordained in January 2009. And he also teaches at the Rome universities, the Angelicum, at the Rome program of Catholic University of America. He says that being a priest is tied to spiritual fatherhood. It's the root of the fatherhood is the desire to transmit what's been given to you. He loves tradition, truth, same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He was born in France. His mother is French and his father is Italian and American. He lived in South Africa. He learned English, grew up largely in the United States and spending 18 years there before moving back to Rome in September 2005. Pro-life has always been a passion of Father Francesco since formation in high school with the catechesis. And going on to university, he went to college at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, where he got his BA. He loved apologetics there, Catholic Answers, EWTN, defending the faith. He went on to do an MA at the University of Chicago. That's where he met Monsignor Barreiro in Rome. He loved his homilies, his masses, and he used the HLI bioethics library. And then he was offered a position in Rome at the Pro-Life March in 2015, just as he'd completed his doctorate in systematic theology from the Santa Croce University in Rome. So, Father Giordano, it's a real privilege and honour to have you on the podcast today. That was just a little bit of a background about yourself. Tell us about your vocation, just to the priesthood, but also to the pro-life movement. And I would love to just hear a bit of your personal testimony. You spoke at our Rome conference in February this year. People loved your talk there. And tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, your background and vocation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And in terms of my vocation, well, I was raised in California, basically, in my youth, and we ended up going to a church where there were a lot of big families with lots and lots of children. Every family had at least, I mean, there were about, I don't know, maybe 10 families with 10 kids at least. And then the others had between 5 and 10. And then, it was just like kids all over the place. And then there was a cemetery there. And so it was a very interesting place because there was this beautiful mass and just a lot of Catholic dynamic, very Catholic, and then there were they were from the babies to the from the crib to the cradle, basically to the to death, from birth to
Cradle to the
death. So it
grave,
was like
yeah.
the whole, yeah, that's it. So you got the sense of the wholeness of the church and the wholeness of life. And so it was just, it was not so much kerygma as much as a martyria, as a witness of it. And then there was good preaching. The priests were good and everything, and the good confessions and good everything. So there was also good witness, good kerygma. There was all of it. There was a whole package deal. And then and there were raised in San Diego, there were Protestants in my environment as well in high school. And I remember one of them was this Lebanese, uh, Lebanese. I remember very well. He was kind of he was a senior, and I was a sophomore in this AP European history class. I remember, and I looked up to him very much. And I thought that he was probably Catholic, being Lebanese, but he said no, he was Protestant, firmly Protestant, and tried to convert me. But I'm like, how can you convert? I would not have that. And I was convinced of, the faith that was transmitted to me, even though I didn't have answers for him necessarily. And I remember firmly what Father Neely told me. He was my priest, and he said, "Don't worry so much if you don't have answers for him now, but worry about being convinced yourself, and use the questions he has to grow in that conviction. Don't use this as like a doubt, but as a temptation." He made the distinction between temptation and doubt, just a voice of temptation that with your firmness and your faith, you will grow to confront that as well. Oh, very wise. And yeah, it's right. I wasn't involved in this person's conversion, or hardly ever spoke to him afterwards, after he graduated. But I did go on to always to have an apologetic approach to my faith, and found myself with these Calvinists, a lot of Calvinists, very convinced Calvinists at Vanderbilt. And I remember even there, I'm studying European history again, medieval history, and I think realizing the history it's my history. It's the history of Europe. It's the history of the church. And so I remember, debating with the Calvinists, over Huss, the Hussites in the 1400s, and then Luther. And it was one thing after another. But my medieval history professor, he said to me, you're unique in that you personalize it, your re-education. I thought to myself, what else can you do but personalize it? I remember another class in literature, angelic and demonic themes of 20th century literature, with Professor Sullivan. And he, God rest his soul, he was a wonderful professor, Southern gentleman. And he had known Flannery O'Connor. And
Wow.
So we were talking about Flannery O'Connor personally. And then we read, he read Graham Greene and Evelyn Waugh, and just all these different English authors, on top of obviously Southern grotesque, the genre of Flannery O'Connor. But I'd read Flannery O'Connor in high school, but I'd read it in a different light here, in terms of the themes, the angelic and demonic themes, in terms of my faith. Then everything became in terms of my faith. All this stuff, even sociology. Now I'm using what I learned in sociology to defend the faith, because now I teach a course, for example, on Christopher Dawson, and he was also a sociologist. So then I talk about the 5 social institutions that I learned about in sociology. And then at the University of Chicago, I learned how to basically do a lot of interdisciplinary work with literature and other disciplines, outside of that. It was a wonderful experience at the University of Chicago. And there, a lot of my friends actually became Catholic around in my circles. I don't know what happened. There was just a lot of us. And I remember an evangelical, very good friend of mine. We were living together, and then I'd bring him to mass, and then we would discuss, and it was very lively, and there were real conversions and a real lively experience. And, you know, so it taught me a lot about the importance of spreading the faith, of the new evangelization. We talked about, I was raised in the papacy of JP2, and John Paul II was a new evangelization. And what did he mean by that? You have to evangelize where you are. You have to talk about the gospel. You have to not stop talking about it. Even with those you think are already converted, they're not converted, because the conversion is a change of mentality. And we are living in a society that has an atheistic mentality. Practically speaking, it's an atheistic society. And we don't even know that we are atheists anymore in the society, And so, I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, we have atheistic tendencies and suppositions. We live in a Kantian age, and Freud and Nietzschean age of nihilism right now. And then you read all these philosophers and you start to understand, well, Nietzsche was really attacking Kant. Well, and Kant, what did he do? Well, he didn't, then you start to really get into this. And then you start realizing that the answers are in the faith. That there is an answer to Kant, that I just gave a talk, in fact, today on St. Thomas Aquinas, because I ended up getting into St. Thomas Aquinas and I ended up studying him for my theology. My specialization was in St. Thomas. And I talked to my audience about God, science, and morality. Those 3 points. How can St. Thomas help us in these? Well, God in the 5 ways, and then I talked about the externally understanding the causality. Okay, so whereas Kant would say we don't know the causes of things, we can't know the noumena, we have to know the phenomena, and that's all we know. Well, I said, well, that's not all we know. I mean, Thomas asks the causes of things. What are the causes of this? And those are questions that we ask ourselves because internally we have a desire for truth. The intellect and the will are these 2 faculties that desire the truth. And desire the truth and desire the good. So you have those 2 aspects. You have to have, this desire of the truth of the intellect, which is like, and that's desiring the cause, because the more you know the causes, the more you'll know what the effect, why the effects are the way they're working. And so that's very nourishing to the mind. So then this led me to the second point. Well, science doesn't contradict the faith. If you look at science as just positivism, okay, Alan Bloom in his Closing of the American Mind talks about how the word scientist comes in the English language in 1847. And I always ask myself, well, before then, were there no scientists? Wasn't Aristotle a scientist? Yes, he was. Of course he was. He was a biologist. But he wasn't just a biologist. He was asking himself, why? What's behind all of this? And so the faith, integrates all of these things. But above all, the faith is not just about philosophy. The faith is about revelation. It's about the word, the revealed word that then nourishes us and says, oh yes, there's a truth to this, and you understand. Then you go into the understanding not only that God exists, but what God is. So not just the existence, but the essence of God by the theology that you study. And that's when you get into the Trinity. And then lots of beautiful things come up from there. And then you understand the analogy aentis, the analogy fide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then all this has an effect on your moral life.
Yeah.
And you can't just say, like Kant says in the Discourse on Practical Reason, well, just the categorical imperative. No, you can't. That's not sufficient. Because if you say the categorical imperative, then you get to the revolution of 1968, when people say, no, it's not enough that just my grandmother or my mother or who knows said what, and I just have to do this because I have to do it. I need to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Well, the faith has answers to all of this.
Absolutely.
The faith has the whys.
Yeah.
And so this then takes me to talking about the moral life. It takes me to reflect upon, the moral life and the society that we live in. And well, there's a big issue in society today. Well, the whole pro-life issue and what is the nature of man? These are all questions that, I want to know who I am. And well, if I am a man, well, I'm not an animal. I have an intellect and a will. And what distinguishes me from the animals? Well, they have souls, but they're sentient, sensitive souls. Plants have souls, but they're vegetative souls. My soul is a rational soul. I'm able to talk to animals, but I'm also able to talk to angels and God. As St. Thomas says, the horizon eternitatis, I'm the horizon of eternity. We are on the horizon of eternity as men. We can not comprehend God as he does. In tota et simul comprehensio, only God is eternal and can totally and simultaneously comprehend himself. We can't comprehend him. We can only know the existence and the essence, but we can't comprehend him or else we'd be God. And okay, fine, but I can get pretty close. So obviously I'm not a dog. And so what distinguishes me from a dog and a giraffe or whatever? The language, the capacity to reason, the capacity to think. So now is this always explicit? Is this always this potential, is it always actualized? No. In some of the weakest among us, it's not always actualized. And who are the weakest among us? Well, the babies in the womb.
The unborn, yeah.
The unborn. And, well, even the dying. So those two elements are connected. The weakest, the disabled, they're not able to talk anymore, but are they if they had the capacity, if they didn't have the impediments, the physical impediments or whatever impediment, would they be able to? Yes, they would. Because they are naturally, that is their nature, they're human beings. They are not potential human beings, they are human beings with potential. Big difference. So you understand, so all of this came together, and also my defense for life. And it got into all the different argumentations, So on a philosophical level, writing article stuff, Alistair McIntyre, limited rational animals, his book, wonderful, excellent, to understand our limits and to understand that we have to help each other out, that none of us is a self-made man, that we're all essentially dependent upon each other and especially dependent upon God, all these themes. Okay, well, sometimes, obviously, when you're in the pro-life working actively in pro-life, these argumentations can't come in such a way like I'm describing right now. I mean, this requires more study, this requires work in class, this requires a culture in the families, this requires a lot of time. So what makes me interested in what you're doing at 40 Days for Life? What makes me interested in what you're doing is that, Sean Carney's book, I just had it released along with, I'm sorry, I'm fast forwarding into what I'm doing right now.
Yep.
But Sean Carney's book, What to Say When?
Apologetics.
Well, we had it. It was translated recently into Italian, and I did the preface. And then also Cardinal Muller did the preface. I was like, whoa. Brilliant. And then I did the release a couple of weeks ago in Modena, along with a book that Human Life International has written, a manual for pro-lifers, pro-life manual that Brian Close edited. And I had that translated as well. And I discovered in Italy that these two texts work together hand in hand to help guide the pro-lifers who are doing their work in front of the hospitals, praying the rosary, etc., which is what I used to do as well. When I was in America and I was in the seminary, and we'd go and pray. I remember from the Cathedral of St. Louis all the way to I'd studied also in St. Louis, and I would walk with, I remember Archbishop Regali at the time, and we'd walk from had the mass there, or the priest that would have every Saturday we had mass, and we'd go and pray in front of the Planned Parenthood, not too far from the cathedral.
You said your pride and joy are the pro-life students from the apologetics course. So apologetics is a real big passion of yours, and that was showing.
I'm sorry, it's showing right now. I'm talking about it right now. It's my passion because and it's not just that. It's, I mean, there's a distinction
ties in
between
with the mission.
apologetics.
Yeah,
Pardon?
it ties in with the mission of HLI and 40 Days for Life. You know,
Absolutely.
we've got to share our faith, and we've got to, you know, evangelize with others, and we're on the streets, and we're in the best position to do that. So that's where we can share the faith. And if we don't know it and we can't share it, we don't know philosophy, then. And you've had this rich upbringing from large families at the beginning, and then you've been through all the academic from American universities, and then your doctorate in Rome. So, and then how did you end up? You know, firstly as a priest, and then the pro-life is a vocation within a vocation, I suppose. Of
absolutely, it's a vocation.
Finding,
yeah,
finding
it fits
the role
in.
in HLI. Yeah, in Rome.
It fits in because it makes sense. It's a culture. It's a culture of life. And it's a culture. That's what JP2's emphasis on, the gospel of life. Mm-hmm. It's the culture of life. And I remember being raised reading every week on the National Catholic Register. They had an article. They had a clip from the gospel of life. And I remember reading those. And that's where I find, you know, Human Life International really fit in also because Father Marx founded Human Life International in the 1970s. I mean, it was not Human Life International originally, but it was in the 1970s. As soon as Roe versus Wade came out, he started becoming very active in you know, in the apostolate around the world, everywhere. And he saw that the principal problem was contraception. Because he said the contraceptive mentality brings about abortion. Oh, this is very interesting. And now, you know, I'm reading books like by Abigail Favell. She talks about from the genesis of gender, she says, the genesis of gender. And in that book, she shows that there's a connection between contraception and the whole gender thing. It's really a fascinating book, The Genesis of Gender. Yeah. And I wrote an article in a National Catholic Bioethics Quarterly recently. And this is proving exactly the foundational connection there. And Paul VI in Humanae Vitae, when he didn't, it wasn't necessarily about abortion, it was about contraception, Humanae Vitae. And people don't understand that they don't understand the wisdom there in that encyclical. But we see that years later. I like to focus on number 17, which shows that there's going to be problems in the way that men and women have a rapport with each other sexually, and that's a very strong number. You know, if you look at it, it's like, whoa, it's saying that, and you're like, how does this relate to the way that we report it with each other? Of course it does, because contraception makes the woman behave in a sense like the man in a way, because she thinks that she doesn't have to worry about it, so she can just go around with it, just like the man goes around, everyone goes around, and well, whereas in the past it was like the virtue of a woman to preserve herself, to be careful, not to, you know, get in, you know, to live in chastity, basically, you know, because there were these rules for a reason, and when you see that the woman then starts approaching her sexuality like a man does and feels free to do whatever the man does. Well, but she's not a man though. And but this change of behavior has an effect on the rapport between the man and the woman then.
Yeah.
And this then creates all the whole gender issues. You have to read the book by Abigail Favell. It's very wise the way she actually really shows what Paul VI says in Humanae Vitae 17 really can become more elaborate. She shows the consequences of it. So it's very, very interesting, very intriguing. Obviously, today it's very polemical to say these things. I see this with some of the young ladies that they don't right away. They don't understand right away what I'm trying to say to them, and so you have to know how to explain. You know, it's not always so easy. Sometimes these dogmas of the church are difficult for people to digest because we live also what Alistair McIntyre emphasizes is a very emotive society. So the emotions that people have, and they don't think through what they're doing. They don't think through why the church is saying what she's saying. They just get upset or whatever.
Yeah.
Our objective is to say what needs to be said and then figure out how to say it to whom.
Yeah.
And that's not always very easy. Truth and charity. We have to use truth
That's
and
right.
charity, but we have to understand where they're at. And it's, when you're involved in this apostolate, you realize how delicate things are because we live in a post-sexual revolution. So it's good to also understand the roots of the sexual revolution, where that's coming from, the philosophy behind it. That's why I recommend this book because it's got a lot of that in there as well. And even the different schools of feminism and all that we're dealing with, and how to deal with women, what women are going through today, what they're having to, the choices they're having to make. I'll say a point on this actually.
Yeah.
In sociology, you have these 5 social institutions: family, education, religion, politics, and economics. FERPE. Family, education, religion, politics, and economics. And, okay, combine that with Aristotle's causes. You got the final cause, you got the efficient cause, you got the material cause, and the formal cause. Okay, well, what a woman has to think about, as she's going on to college and she's thinking about her career and everything, she's got a double consideration to think about. But so do men. Men have to think about their career and they have to think about their vocation. Both. Not just one or the other, both. Because we're made to be happy, and a career is not going to be what's going to make us happy necessarily. A career ends, and it's also part of a vocation. Of course it is. I mean, if you're a lawyer or a doctor, you love your vocation. It's part of your vocation.
Yeah.
But really, a lot of the career and jobs have to do with money or politics or whatever.
Yeah.
That becomes, in a sense, efficient causality, instrumental cause. But we got to ask ourselves the bigger question. What am I made for? What am I really made for? Am I made to become, I don't know, to be working in an office my whole life? I mean, that could happen. I could be made just for that. I don't think that's what we're made for.
No.
The catechism says, you're made to know, to love, to serve God in this life and to enjoy him in the next. Okay. So religion, that's pretty important. Education, informing yourself too in that religion, pretty important. Family, pretty important. Forming yourself in a family, to become a father, to become a mother. Timothy Fortin talks about fatherhood, the perfection of man. Well, motherhood's the perfection of woman. So both. So if you start thinking about that as your final cause, and then you look at your career as your efficient cause, and also part of your final cause, okay, it helps you to be happy to work and all, then things become more clear and orderly as you're considering these things, And I find that in the end, everyone's looking for love. Everyone's looking for happiness. And these are truth. This is just the truth. People, that's what we're looking for. But in order to find, the will that looks for happiness needs to be ordered according to the intellect that guides it. And so I think our role has to be to guide people, to guide people. Really, what you're really looking for is a family.
Yeah.
So, and women are looking for that, and women are looking for men. Men are looking for women. That's really what we're looking for. And we need to help form those men. So we need fathers to help form those men, and we need mothers to help form those men, and we need mothers and fathers to help form those women, And this is where also a lot of my apostle has to do with teaching about fatherhood.
Yeah.
So I use. Sorry, yes.
Oh, how do you tie in being a priest and working for a pro-life group? So you're talking about fatherhood. Obviously you're a father as a priest, and you're an apologist. You're an academic as well. So how do you bring how do you bring the role of fatherhood to life in your apostolate? you know,
Oh,
not being a physical father of born children,
right.
but spiritual fatherhood.
Well, the spiritual fatherhood is the
Yeah,
highest fatherhood. Let us remember that
yeah,
every father has to be
yeah.
a spiritual father first and foremost.
That's right. Yeah.
There's the spiritual and the material fatherhood, and the physical, organic fatherhood, and then and then there's the fatherhood that needs to take care of the economic needs of your child. So there's these three
Yeah.
elements: spiritual, organic, and material, like what you need to actually, and the heights of the fatherhood are the spiritual, because our souls need to be nourished and need to be educated and guided, and to meet the Father in heaven. He's the Father.
He's the big
He's the
boss.
real Father.
Yeah.
And Jesus's mission is Jesus' mission is to bring us to the Father. John chapter 17 is for us, ut unum sint, to all of us to see Him, the Father. That's what Jesus does. Jesus points us to the Father,
Mhm.
clearly. The Holy Spirit inhabits in us, right? It's a long story, but it's like two entities that work together in this, something beautiful about that. Well, so the role of the priest has to be a father, to be a spiritual father indeed. And what does a father do? Well, a father has to help the other grow to be what the other ought to be.
Mhm.
The father, the authority, the autoritas of the father, the autoritas which makes the other grow, augere, which makes
Mhm.
the other grow. That's the role. And that's what's being attacked today in our society.
Yeah.
That role is very important, because that role makes the other grow, putting limits and showing the other what one is and showing our limits. So we have to know that we're limited. Go back to what
Mhm.
Alistair McIntyre says. The limited nature, our limited nature, but our infinite, eternal aspirations. So we have these huge aspirations, wonderful dreams that every child has and that we ought to have as well, but within our limits. Knowing what our limits are is what a father does. A father tells you these are your limits. Work with what you've got. What does Jesus do with the miracle of the 5,000, for instance? He has 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He's got just that to work with. Those are his limits. And he works with those limits to produce the miracle. But he works with what he's got. He doesn't work with what he doesn't have. And so a father teaches a son or a daughter, this is what you've got. And a father teaches you, this is what you've got to live outside in society. A father helps a child grow in society with what he has. That's the gift of the fatherhood to the son and to the daughter. And that gives the son and the daughter a sense of security in their own strength, and knowing what they have, their own strength, their own gifts to work with. And the mother, what's the mother's role in all this? Well, the mother's role is is an interior. The father is sort of an external role. The father has to recognize the son. Remember this. You have to recognize the son. You have to say, that is my son. The mother, there's no need for her to recognize the son or the daughter, because it's in the womb. There's no doubt about whose son or daughter that is, if it's the mother. In fact, you see in Jewish tradition, you know, uh, you know, you are Jewish when your mother is Jewish. You're not necessarily Jewish if your father is Jewish, but you're Jewish if your mother is Jewish. And because everyone knows, we all come from our mother. But the thing is, the next step is, okay, that's the most natural step, the motherhood. Then comes the father to say, I recognize this son or this daughter. And I recognize and I take this responsibility. Oh, this is very important. I recognize the son and this daughter, and I take this responsibility. That's where that's what we're trying to teach, the virtue. That's what we're trying to teach. You have to be responsible, parenthood, for crying out loud. That's where the whole institution of marriage comes in.
Yeah.
And that's what forms the family, the nucleus and the formation of the society. It's the foundational institution of society. When you've got that father and the mother, and you got both roles have to come into that. The son or daughter needs to feel the warmth and closeness of the mother, which comes naturally, but they also need to feel the support of the father guiding. In fact, in families where the father is religious, where the father believes in God and is God-fearing, you're going to have children that are going to be God-fearing. Absolutely. Because the father's example is really important in all of this. And the father is taking a lead in this and encouraging and enforcing that and then being encouraged by the wife. There's this book by Matthew Pagot, very beautiful book on Genesis. And he says, who is Eve but the one who shows Adam who he is? She's the mirror of Adam. Who is Our Lady? Our Lady is the mirror of justice, speculum justitiae. She shows Jesus she's the mirror of Jesus. When she encounters him, during the Passion, she shows him who he is. He, looking into her, sees himself in the mother. So the woman has to be accompanying and complementary to the man, perfecting the man. You see the stories in the scripture with Delilah, she's not that way with Samson. She's not playing she's a corrupted form of Eve. She's certainly not Our Lady. So I think everyone needs to sort of know their limits, their role, the man, the woman, and that's where, when you do that, then you're happy.
If we don't have that philosophical foundation, then we can't have a pro-life culture, because if you don't have the family, the roles of mother and father, and then it's like, well, if you don't have that foundation, then it's like, how can we have a pro-life culture? This is the foundational philosophy, and many people today haven't had that formation, and this is foundational. If you don't have it, then it's like, okay, we got to start from the beginning, guys. So so from the philosophy and the foundation, the abstract to the real, this is where the apostolate and the apologetics come in. It's like, you're engaging with students at university, many of whom come from broken families and broken backgrounds, and already, and you talk about truth and charity. How do we share the gospel to a broken generation who it's like, you don't even want to share the truth, because it's like, truth and charity, like, hey, how much truth do you want? It's like, do you want to censor yourself before we're done for hate speech and the rest of it? So how do you
it's very difficult.
I
think we also have to know what to give to whom.
That's right.
St. Paul gives us an example of this. It's like, you don't go give a steak to a kid, to a baby. You give milk. So the thing is, you got to realize who you have in front of you. How much can they take? And so you have to have a virtue of prudence in this apostolate too. You can't shove things down people's throats. Some people can only. People come from a world where they're in a sexual revolution. They don't believe in God. There's no God around. There's no, and you come in. From the hill, from the mountain top. You've got to somehow. You got to die to yourself in this apostolate. You've got to die to yourself. There's got to be a little bit of imitatio Christi, imitation of Christ, the kenosis. And anyone who's involved in this apostolate is aware of this. However, these instruments, that from a lot of such experience, you share in Sean Carney's book or Brian Close's book, that's years and years of experience from experts. That's what experience comes from. The peritus, the experts, those who have lived this with love, really. These are hearts of love, Sean Carney, Brian Close, and our president, Father Bouquet, Father Marks, our founder, all these people, all these great apostles of the pro-life movement. The apostles of the pro-life movement. I didn't expect to use that word, but but sent by God in many ways, missionaries of the pro-life movement. we've got to learn from them. We've got to learn from their wisdom, and we have to keep we just have to keep the objective going, and also we have to be hopeful because in the end we also know that the well, that we're right. I think we're right. I mean, look at the consequences of abortion. Look at the consequences of the sexual revolution. A lot of unhappy people. There are a lot of unhappy people around.
Yeah.
And so how do we deal with that? It's not so easy. There's not a black or white answer, but there are some good answers. And these books have good starting points. Because what you've got in these books is this, and we've got to realize we're living in an age of propaganda. And Edward Bernays was a master of propaganda. He was cousin of Freud, and he knew what he was doing, and he did a good job. Okay, well, as Father Marx says, well, two can play this game. You want to play this game? Fine. We can also go about spreading with tenacity our replies to your common propaganda, questions and answers or whatever, my body, my choice. Oh, is it really your body? Is that baby really in you? Is that baby really your body, your choice? That baby is not your body. He's a body. He has separate chromosomes. He has a separate DNA, could be a different race, it's not just an organ in your body. There's an answer to these questions. And that's what these books provide. That's reality. That baby, that's a baby. That's not just like some fetal tissue. That's not some fetal tissue. That's a baby. And the issue of conception. No, it's, we don't know if it's a baby until 10th week. Remember Father Ford, he talks this. It's like Father Ford used the Aristotelian, the souls, from the vegetative to the sensitive to the rational soul. Well, then science has proved to us, we have science on our side. No. The conception happens right at the moment of conception. There's a living person there. Father Ford had to change his mind afterwards. He wrote another book to change his mind. He was a Salesian priest. Thomas Aquinas didn't have the science down for that. He was following Aristotelian science, but now science teaches us, no, in that moment, there's an actual, in that moment of conception, you have a new being.
Yeah.
Okay, we have these answers. So that's what these books offer us. So these questions are passé. Well, passé, but we have to keep answering this without hesitation.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we have to gain from the wisdom from these pioneers, and then the rest, then we can always go more deeply into these issues, I think, but we have to have a heart in this. We have to have the heart. For example, here in Italy, I coordinate a group of pro-life groups.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's who I'm sending this book to all these different pro-life groups.
It's great.
To answer to, and this is working very well. We find all of the articles in all the newspapers across the country that mention, that mention abortion. I'm just focusing on abortion right now, and they mention this issue, and people in our group, they see these articles and they answer them, and the answers are put in these newspapers. This is a great way to get our message across and to answer. And it's very repetitive because it's the same old, same old. That's what propaganda does. It's same old, same old. But we're not just about propaganda.
Yeah.
We're more than propaganda. We have the gospel. So I mean, why should we let ourselves get overrun by these superficial answers that are not helping people? This is not about women's health in the end, as they try to say. It's not about, it doesn't help the woman.
No.
And we know this from experience. It doesn't help the man either. Look at what happened with Britney Spears. She came out and said she's still thinking about it. It's Justin Timberlake, he just told her to have an abortion. And she's still upset about it. Now they broke up over this. These are real issues. And when you get stars like that talking about it, then it's real. It's real before, but it's real, really real,
Mm-hmm.
Does this make any sense?
Absolutely. But it's like you mentioned having local leaders and then, building a pro-life culture from like the families, communities. There must be many examples you have of, how making the pro-life message personal. So you mentioned Britney Spears of, from the abstract of the issue, and then how do we impact people in their real lives to transform their lives? Number one, through apologetics. Number two, through our own personal apostolate, our own personal witness, sharing the faith, sharing the pro-life message in a way that brings life to other people. And that's very much what our prayer vigils are about with 40 Days for Life, publicly witnessing outside, hospitals, abortion centres. When we do that, we can reach hundreds of people, and sometimes it's a simple message. Other times, it's a challenge. We get anger, we get sort of all sorts of responses from across the way. But we can die to self through our own personal witness. But it's also very spiritually fruitful if we engage the culture where they're at, and that's what I hope for all our local groups, is to encourage them to meet people where they're at. And the same, I'm sure, for Human Life International. You've got groups all over the world. How do we share our faith in a way that's spiritually fruitful, in a way that brings, the truth in charity, meeting people where they're at, not hitting them over the head with a Bible or a sledgehammer, not being too rough or too aggressive in the evangelization, but doing it in a way that touches people's hearts. And that inspires them, if they don't have that foundation of, family life, the rich, large families you mentioned growing up. If people don't have that, then they don't have the sort of, pro-life infrastructure of 101 basics. And it's like, we've got to start right at the beginning. And it's like the really deep philosophy that you've mentioned all through this call. It's like, many people haven't had that. They've been starving. They're starving spiritually, starving, mentally, intellectually, starving for truth, starving for life, for truth, for Christ ultimately. And that's how
we have a lot of hungry people around.
Yeah, a lot of hungry people. Some of them don't even realize they're hungry. They're ignorant of their deep spiritual hunger, and we can tap on their stomachs and go, there's a lot more there. And listening to you, Father, has been like drinking from a fire extinguisher of knowledge and truth. So been showered in many graces. So what's it like living in Rome as well? Is it what do you predict for the pro-life movement in the future? Where do you see hope internationally? Are we going to be in the catacombs soon? And what do you predict sort of happening for the next stage of the pro-life movement? I've been going to conferences there for years, and we've had issues, but there's lots of hope as well. And I travel a lot internationally. There's lots of hope in different countries, and every country's in a different place. So we're living in a very post-Christian culture in Western Europe, as you mentioned. It's very secular. We've just had thought crimes in Britain. So, we're really at the crosshairs of cancel culture here. So what's it like living in Rome, and where do you see hope for the future?
Well, I do see hope for the future. Yeah. Recently, there was an interview by Cardinal Ruini, who used to be the president of the Episcopal Conference here in Italy, and he was the vicar of Rome. And he said that he has hope for all this in what is called creative minorities, Benedict XVI's creative minorities. And he emphasized in this interview, just released the other day, 2 days ago, which I found fascinating. He talked about the Scandinavian countries, and I agree with him wholeheartedly on this. Bishop Erik Varden in Norway, Cardinal Arborelius in Stockholm, and other bishops in Finland also. I know that they've had. There's a booming amount of people seeking the faith. Why? Because when you have when you hit like rock bottom, in a sense, in the sense of secularism and nihilism and nothingness and and no sense of life, you start asking yourself a few questions. And so, there needs to be people like people there to help answer those questions. And those are the creative Christians that are there that that are already they've already drunk from that the Pierian spring of wisdom. They've drunk from that, and they also have realized they think. I'll have to read you this. I have to tell you this. You just made me think about the Pierian spring of wisdom. There's this epigram by Alexander Pope that I learned when I was in high school, and I'll never forget it. A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Pierian spring. For their shallow draughts intoxicate the mind, and drinking largely sobers us again. You see, this is a beautiful epigram. A little learning is a dangerous thing, indeed it is. Because if you learn a little, you think, for their shallow draughts intoxicate the brain. The shallow draughts of that little learning intoxicate you to think that you know more than you know. And so the irony is that you have to drink more of it to become sober. It's a very nice play of words. And so the thing is, if you love people and you're from there, if you're from where they're from, and you've been touched by God in a way, in a particular way, by Jesus Christ and his message throughout history, throughout our European history, that you see all over in these churches and the buildings that we see, and it's all of our history, it's our identity. When you've been touched by that, you can't help but want to give it. And you're going to find any way you can to give it, to communicate it. And you're going to become, in that way, a mediator, a creative mediator. What is the mediator? The priesthood. This is the priesthood of all believers, the council talks about. You have, what is the mediator? The mediator, St. Thomas makes this very clear in Terza Pars, question 26. The mediator is the bridge. Jesus is the mediator par excellence.
Yeah.
He is perfectly divine and perfectly human. Perfect. And we can't copy him. We can only imitate him. And what does he do? He mediates between the word, he is the logos, so he mediates between what's up here, the kenosis, and what's down here. Communicatio idiomata, the communication of the idiom, from the divine to the human. And what is the idiom? The idiom, to learn an idiom, to know a language. An idiom is a language, and an idiot is he who does not know a language. So the idiot is he who does not know the grammar of his own language. Well, the grammar of my language, my human language, is Christ.
Yeah.
And he then can express himself. When you know the grammar, you can talk to all the languages that are guided by that same grammar. And so every individual has his own language, has his own life. And so the word of God is up here, but it's not detached from here below. It's not detached from us because it's the grammar. It's the grammar, as Newman talks about, the grammar of assent. It's the grammar to which we assent to, and that you cannot doubt about. And so you have all these very fervent Christians that know for sure, like I do when I was in high school, that I knew that, well, my faith is important. My parents have given me this. I had an uncle who was in the Second Vatican Council, was an archbishop at Siena, and all this. And there's no way that I'm going to leave my faith. I was convinced of that. You got to be convinced of something, And then I started really getting into it and learning about it and convincing myself, as Father Neely had told me, and convincing others as I'm moving along. But who's working in all of this? The Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the one that's working in all of this, that's guiding you in all of this. And so I have a lot of hope for Europe because I think that a lot of us are in the midst of all of this. You have all of these like also the immigration issue. I believe that the new evangelization today is in Europe. We don't have to go who knows where. They're coming
Yep.
here. Huh? We got them here. So you got them here. So you've got to take the opportunity to talk to people.
Yep.
And I think there are a lot of creative Christians out there today talking to people. And, Christopher Dawson, he emphasized this. This is really important. He was really worried about the whole ecumenical movement and everything. And really what he divides people into are two groups, the believers and the non-believers. Those who really believe in what is true and the true God and are really seeking the truth. Adequatio intellectum ad rem, who are seeking to understand reality. When I have an open heart like that, when I have someone who's really an open mind, I should say, an open mind who's really seeking the truth, it's very easy to talk to.
Yep.
And that's where all this is happening right now. There's a lot of people that are like so sick and tired of the lies.
Yeah.
And so sick and tired of the sadness that all these lies and all this all this has left them.
Yeah.
That whenever they have someone coming in there to tell them, no, look, there's much more to this than this. There's much more behind, this cave. There's this light behind that's causing these shadows.
Later.
And when they meet people like that, and that's where my hope is. I know that there are a lot of good people, fervent in the faith today. Not the majority. Creative minorities.
Yeah.
And that's my hope.
Yeah.
People who will not give up.
And
that's the witness. That's the witness. That's the martyrdom.
Yeah.
It's the witness that gives you much more than that. That gives you more, because from that martyrdom, from that witness, it spreads. The faith spreads like oil, like it takes a course of its own. We don't have to worry. All we have to worry about is to be generous with what God has given us.
Yeah.
And so much can come from that. Just be generous. Don't copy each other. Imitate each other.
Yeah.
Give of your gifts so that God may say, in the parable of the talents, there's 5, 3, and 1. Remember this parable of the talents in Matthew 25. And he's got the 5, the 3, and the 1. And who's the one that holds his gift to himself?
The one.
The one! The one without the gifts. The one with the 5 and the one with the 3 doubles it.
Yeah.
That's what God wants from all of us. He's given us each a gift. Let's discover what those gifts are. Let's work with what we got.
Yeah.
That's what Jesus did. The miracle of the 5,000. He got 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish. He does a lot with that. And that's where my hope is.
Yeah.
We've got a lot. What do we have? We have a patrimony. We have a history. We have a huge history of Christianity here. We have the saints, we have the martyrs. For crying out loud, we have a lot to work with.
Yeah.
We should not lose hope. Hope is based on faith.
What message do you have for our 40 Days for Life international leaders and volunteers? They're praying outside abortion centres, they're witnessing in public, they're organising campaigns, and they're spreading the gospel of life, in the public square. What message do you have for them?
Well, I think this whole time I've been speaking to them, no? Age quadagis, we say in Latin, to each other, do as you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't give up.
Yeah.
That's the message. Don't give up. And when you have a moment, of discouragement, encourage each other. Think about this. Discuss things with each other. Always in light of the faith and in light of reason and in light of, just reason things out. When you feel discouraged, when you feel, it's just a feeling. It's a temptation. Temptations are distinct from doubt.
Yeah.
Never doubt that you have what you have assented to with your faith, with an act of faith. You can't doubt that.
Yeah.
And when you have when you have temptations rather to doubt, well, reason your way out of that. We have answers, and if you need, just talk to each other, pray for each other, pray with one another. I would say also spend a lot of time in silence and reflection. Spend a lot of adoration. This is a time that our Lord is calling us to adoration. Many adoration chapels. Spend much time in adoration with our Lord. Talk to our Lord in adoration. Spend much time with Him. Go to Mass daily. Frequent the sacraments. Go to confession. Really see how the grace of God operates in your life and see it concretely with all that you have, the difficulties you have to face. Bring them to God and bring what God has given you to others. Become a channel of His grace.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, it's an exciting time for the pro-life movement, as you mentioned. It's not all sort of doom and gloom in Europe, and we have to have that positive outlook and also evangelistic outlook as well. There's so many hearts and minds we can touch, and we don't need to. We want to light a candle, not curse the darkness. That's the Mother Teresa said. So it's
you start with what's little. I think a good thing that I could say is, to be love at the heart of the church, as Saint Teresa of Lisieux says. That's not so easy. To do everything with great love.
Yeah.
So every time that you're praying for that, for that soul, that mother, it's a soul you're praying for. When you're praying in front of an abortion clinic, abortion mill, they call it, you pray in front of here we don't have abortion mills, we have hospitals here, and you have the abortions happening inside.
Right.
Well, when you pray in front of those, realize you're praying for those souls, praying for those babies also, those souls that, sometimes also some of these souls of these babies, some of them are sometimes the abortions have a more sinister approach to them. Sometimes people have abortions in odium fide. For instance, there was that famous abortion of what was her name? Simone de Beauvoir and what was his name? She was the girl. She was going with this philosopher, and I can't believe his name is escaping me right now. In the 1930s, a French philosopher. Why am I having trouble remembering him? Anyway, his name escapes me right now for some crazy reason. She and this gentleman had a baby to have an abortion.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a sort of intentionality that's a bit different from, in moral philosophy, we talk about formal and material cause. Some of these abortions are in odium fide with that intention. There's abortions connected to Halloween and the satanic practices and things like that. All those babies that die because of that, in odium fide specifically, well, there's a sort of martyrdom in that.
Yeah.
Specifically for those babies. Not all babies, not all those who are killed, but these babies, yes. For those babies, I think you pray for them and you ask them to pray for us in our movement. There's something spiritual there that's going. It was Jean-Paul Sartre, that's the philosopher. Sartre, with Simone de Beauvoir, had a baby. If I'm getting this right, and I might have forgot, maybe I'm getting some fact, but I know they had this baby to have an abortion. I mean, when you have, you can imagine there's an effect that's far greater, I think, in a woman like that than someone that's just desperate, that doesn't know what to turn to, has an abortion, doesn't know what she's doing. There's a difference,
Definitely. Well, we can do spiritual reparation for,
spiritual reparation.
We can pray, and we don't know how God uses our prayers, but that's for sure. This certainly works. So, it's been a real honor and privilege speaking with you, Father. I would like to speak for the next 2 or 3 hours. Been receiving so many graces, and your knowledge and your wisdom is absolutely impeccable. And you have decades of philosophy and moral ethics experience, and not only that the application of that to the pro-life movement is so profound and so deep, and that's what we all need. We all need a formation in the culture of life, and if we don't have it, then we don't have that foundational basis in which to love life. And so many of our compatriots don't have that, and they don't have the sort of pro-life family background, culture, and then from that, this is where abortion and contraception stem from. So you've really explained in our call today the foundational basis of contraception, of the foundation of abortion, and we can witness in our own lives and our own apologetics and sharing our faith and sharing our knowledge and wisdom with others. This can help transform the lives of other people around us in a way that brings up a pro-life culture and a creative minority sense. Yeah.
And I also want to mention one last thing.
Yeah.
Don't fall for this thing where people say, we always talk about abortion and we're not talking about euthanasia. No, this includes euthanasia is connected to this, because if you don't, as Mother Teresa said, if as long as you have abortion, you're going to have wars. So because if you don't understand who that baby is in there, you're not going to understand who that elderly person is either. So they're connected. So I'm not going to be played with that card either by people telling me that all I'm thinking about is abortion. Well, because the numbers are greater as well.
That's
in
right.
abortion too.
The fruits of the same tree, the same contraception.
They're fruit of the same tree
That's right.
in the end.
Yeah.
When I was first told that line, I was walking down the streets of Siena with my great uncle, and he told me that. I was 20 years old, and I was like, what? And I didn't see the connection. Now I see it very clearly.
Yeah.
Mother Teresa was very wise in what she said. When she got the Nobel Laureate, when she got the Nobel Peace Prize. The peace, you're not going to have peace until you understand what man is. And you're not going to understand what man is until you understand who God is. Because that's the other problem. That today we think that man is great insofar as he is man. That's what Pico della Mirandola says back in the 1400s. But man is great insofar as he's in the imago Dei, image of God. So put God back into the picture and you're going to get a lot of changes out of that. Anyway, I'm sorry, I could go on for hours, as you said.
I would love to speak for hours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation.
It's been wonderful speaking with you, Father. God bless all your work. I look forward to seeing you at the next conference. And
likewise.
Thank you so much. For our listeners, do go to 40daysforlifeinternational.com. We've got a whole list of podcasts, of articles, of everything we've been talking about today. Father, I really hope to get you back on the podcast soon. It's been an honor and privilege speaking to you today. May God bless all your work at Human Life International, and please keep up the good fight. And thank you for sharing your encouragement, your wisdom, and your expertise with us today. Thank you so much indeed for listening. May God bless you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
No te pierdas los podcasts de 40 días por la vida internacional con entrevistas, reportajes y testimonios de todo el mundo.
Don't miss our podcasts with interviews, news, and reports from around the world.